I've said in previous videos that Windows 365 is super simple to set up. In fact, the business flavor of Windows 365 is so easy to set up that I'll just show you all the required steps while I'm doing this intro, from purchasing the licenses to signing into your cloud PCs. Because as I've said in the past, setting up Windows 365 Business is simply a manner of purchasing a license and then assigning those licenses to your users. As soon as a license is assigned, the cloud PC will start to be provisioned. And even if that takes some minutes, which I'll conveniently leave out here, the entire process should take less than half an hour. In fact, if you take away all the waiting parts, you should be down to just a couple of minutes. So at least with Windows 365 Business, it's safe to say that Microsoft is living up to their claim that Windows 365 is optimized for simplicity. Windows 365 Enterprise is not quite that simple to set up, but it's not that hard either. If you have the prerequisites in order, the setup process shouldn't take long at all. And even if you start with nothing at all, you should be able to have a working Windows 365 Enterprise setup in less than a couple of hours. So let's take a close look at the Windows 365 Enterprise setup process, shall we? Unlike Windows 365 Business, the Enterprise flavor actually have some prerequisites. They aren't many, but they are there. And let's just get the most boring one out of the way immediately, and that is licensing. Because both flavors of Windows 365 is license-based, meaning that you pay for a license and not for consumption or anything like that. But the Windows 365 Business flavor only requires you to have a Windows 365 license. The Enterprise version of Windows 365 requires you to have a license for both Windows, Intune, Azure AD, and you need a license for the Windows 365. So in my setup, I've opted for the simple way out, and that is to have a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license in addition to the Windows 365 Enterprise license. And just select those two and save, and whew, that's it for licensing. Next of the prerequisites is in Intune, and it's a rather small one. We just need to make sure that our device enrollment restrictions allows for Windows MDM platform enrollments. And we can check that if we head on over to our endpoint manager. We go to devices, we go to enroll devices, enrollment restrictions, we select our default device type restriction, and we take a look at the properties. We can see that Windows MDM is allowed in this case, and that's all the prerequisites in Intune. The next requirement is Active Directory, because Windows 365 Enterprise requires you to have an Active Directory that is up and running and in sync with Azure AD using the ADConnect service. You also need to have hybrid joining enabled so that the cloud PCs that are joined to the domain can be managed by Intune. In my environment, I've set up a VM in Azure that is running as a domain controller, which I've installed ADConnect on, and I've used pretty much the default settings all the way. The only main difference is that after the installer has finished and the initial sync has gone through, I've gone back into ADConnect and configured hybrid joining. And don't be too scared about that, because nowadays it's super simple. It's a matter of ticking a box and letting the installer handle the rest for you. Final one of the prerequisites is the Azure requirements, because Windows 365 Enterprise requires you to have an active Azure subscription. As you can see, we have that here. And in that Azure subscription, there needs to be a vNet that your cloud PCs can connect to. And that vNet also needs to have a direct line of sight to your domain controllers. That means that you need to have a VPN to your on-prem if you're having your domain controllers there, or you can just have your domain controllers running in Azure in the same vNet as your cloud PCs will connect to. Another thing that you need to configure on the vNet is the DNS settings, because the DNS settings for the vNet needs to point to your domain controllers so that your cloud PCs can resolve your Active Directory DNS records. As you can see here, I've swapped out the default Azure provided ones with my custom IP address that's pointing to my domain controller running in Azure. And that's actually it for the Azure requirements. Now that we have our licenses, Intune, Active Directory, and Azure requirements all sorted out, we are done with the prerequisites and we can begin the actual Windows 365 configuration. And Windows 365 Enterprise is managed in the Endpoint Manager, so let's just jump right back there. We'll head on over to Devices, and here we have the Windows 365 section of it. the first thing we need to create is the on-premise network connection. And yes, even though if all your infrastructure is in the cloud in Azure, you still need to create an on-premise network connection, because the on-premise network connection dictates to which Active Directory your cloud PCs will be joined, how they are joined, which vNet they will be put in, and into which resource group in Azure they will reside in. So let's just go to on-premise network connection. We will hit create, and I'll just call it W365 for now. I'll select my Azure subscription. I'll select the existing resource group that I already have my vNet in. I'll select my virtual network, my subnet, and I'll hit next. Now here is the Active Directory details that I need to put in. And in my case, I believe my Active Directory is called demo.headertech.com. I'll skip the organizational unit and I'll input my Active Directory admin account. This needs to be formatted in UPN format. And my password, hopefully I will input this correctly and we will have no issues around this. Next, and review and create. Now that the on-premise network connection is created, you see that the status is running checks. And this will do some checks on if the Active Directory is resolvable from the vNet that we selected, and that the user account that we selected actually have the permissions to join computers to that Active Directory. Now that the on-premise network connection is created and the checks have completed, they are successful, but I do have some warnings, so let's just check them out. Azure AD device sync is a warning. What is that all about? Cannot find the cloud PC computer object in Azure AD. Now this could be due to the fact that the AD sync hasn't run since we created our on-premise network connection, so I'm not that worried about this part. So let's just go back to devices, and the next thing we need to create is the provisioning policy. So let's head on over to provisioning policies. We'll hit create policy, give it a nice little name, and here we select the on-premise network connection that we just created and hit next. And now we select the type of image that we want our cloud PCs to be provisioned with. And here you can have your own custom images, but in this case we will just use the gallery image. And let's see if we can find the Windows 365 Enterprise, Windows 10 Enterprise with Microsoft 365 apps. We do want the latest one, that is this one. Select that, hit select, and then we go to next. And now we need to select groups that this provisioning policy will be valid for. And you can only use groups in this case and not a single user. In this case, I only have one user in my tenant that is going to be using Windows 365, so I can use the all company group. I'll click it, select, and then hit next. Review and create. All looks good. Let's hit create. And there you have it. We have our provisioning policy. Now that we have a on-premise network connection and provisioning policy, and the fact that we assigned our user a Windows 365 Enterprise license earlier on, the cloud PC should actually start to be provisioned. So we can check that if we head on over to all cloud PCs, and we can see that the status of our cloud PC is provisioning. Now this means that all the prerequisites are in order. We have lined up all our ducks in a row. We just need to wait for the provisioning to finish before our user can log into their cloud PC. So some more waiting, I guess. All right, that took a while, but now my cloud PC is provisioned, and that means that I should be able to go to windows365.microsoft.com and see if my cloud PC is available for me. Welcome. All right, next. Get started and open in browser, just for simplicity's sake this time around. Hit allow, and let's see. Right, my password is Now we're actually signing into our Windows 365 Enterprise Cloud PC. And there you have it. We have signed into our Windows 365 Enterprise Cloud PC. And just to kind of prove the point that this is running inside the vNet of our Azure environments, let's see if we can reach the domain controller on its internal IP address. So I'll just hit it in here and see if we can bring up the IIS sites, and there you have it. This is the Cloud PC reaching the domain controller locally on its internal IP address. And yeah, that's just about how you set up Windows 365 Enterprise. Please do leave a like, subscribe, comment, and all the good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!